For decades, we've searched the skies for answers. Governments track unidentified craft on radar. Pilots describe objects performing maneuvers that defy physics. And whistleblowers claim secret programs exist just to study technology that does not belong to our world. The natural assumption is that the mystery lies out there, beyond the clouds, beyond our atmosphere, somewhere in the vast emptiness of space. What if we've been asking the wrong question? Because hidden inside many UFO encounters is a strange and often overlooked detail. Witnesses frequently describe telepathic communication, moments where time seems to distort, encounters that feel less like a physical meeting and more like a shift in awareness. Some researchers have begun to wonder if the phenomenon isn't just simply mechanical. What if the real interface between humanity and whatever is out there is consciousness itself? Then the greatest frontier may not be outer space. It may just be the human mind.
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
Cocktails and Conspiracies is a program created for entertainment purposes only. The stories, theories, and opinions shared on the show explore mysteries, historical interpretations, and conspiracy claims that may be speculative or unverified. Nothing heard on this program should be considered fact, professional advice, or a definitive account of events. Listeners are encouraged to think critically, do their own research, and draw their own conclusions. Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you're tuning in across the nation or around the world. My name is Shane Squarick. Joining me, as always, is the Sultan of Speculation himself, Mr. Phillips. We are your conspiracy realists, back with another episode of your favorite sip-driven conspiracy conversation. It's a lot of alliteration right there. Tonight's guest brings a fascinating perspective to the show. Wajid Hassan has lived a life that spans engineering, acting, voice work, comedy, humanitarian efforts, and more than 40 years studying metaphysics, spirituality, and consciousness. He's also the author of the Amazon bestseller, The Struggle for World Sanity. And what makes his perspective particularly interesting is that he didn't arrive at these ideas through some isolated mystical path. He lived a very grounded professional life while gradually exploring questions that most people never dare to ask. Questions about consciousness, about reality, and about whether or not the UFO phenomenon might actually intersect with something far deeper than technology. Wajid, welcome to Cocktails and Conspiracies.
Thanks, Shane. Thanks, Tim.
Cheers.
Glad to be here on your show.
Glad to have you, sir.
One of the things I mentioned to you I mentioned this to you. My words are completely backwards today, so pardon me for the next hour.
It's a good thing you don't
everyone
have to
listening
talk
out
on this
there.
podcast or anything.
I know that's the biggest challenge of all sometimes, right? We were talking about it a little bit in the green room before we pressed the record button. One of the things we find fascinating on this show specifically is that the people who explore the paranormal, and I'm using a blanket statement there, are often not who you'd expect. They're engineers, they're scientists, they're pilots, military officers, people who otherwise live very normal, structured, professional lives. And that's something that stands out in your story as well. You come from a technical background as a field service engineer, which is about as grounded in a practical profession as you can get. But alongside your career, you also spent decades working in acting, voiceover, narration, and even stand-up comedy. The voiceover work I'm especially infatuated with. I'm so interested in that field. And somewhere along that journey, you also developed a deep interest in metaphysics and spirituality. So I'd love to start at the beginning and briefly kind of run through it. What first sparks your curiosity about metaphysics?
Well, the thing is, with my professional career, that was kind of a sideline to what I was really fascinated with. And what really started it off was when I was in England at the age of 17. I got this really strong feeling that I need to go somewhere on a Friday night at midnight. I didn't know why. There was some kind of inclination, intuition, something that just guided me, and I couldn't ignore it. So I got a map out of England, and I traced it over with my hand, and I knew that I had to be at a place near Stonehenge at midnight on a Friday. I was being guided to go to that place. This is at the age of 17. I didn't know what was going to happen, what was going to go on, and so I made my way up there by you couldn't call it Greyhound or coach. I got there at midnight, a place called Clearwater. It was about 3 miles away from Salisbury, near Stonehenge. And when I got there at midnight, I crossed over on the farm area. I looked up in the sky, and this white orb moved from the right, from the west to the east. So I knew I was in the right place. Didn't know anything about flying saucers, UFOs, and I stayed there till about 1 a.m. And then another bright object came from the south to the north, and to me that signified the sign of a cross. I don't know why, but it did. And then at 3 a.m., this large craft appeared in the forest, came over, hovered over my air, exactly where I was, and this white beam of light shone over me, and I was filled with this tremendous, like, spiritual energy. It was like an initiation. And there was a reason for it, and I kept it quiet. First of all, because nobody would have believed me, and second of all, they probably thought I was some kind of quack, or I'd had an hallucination. So I kept it quiet. So many years later, when I wrote the book, The Struggle for World Sanity, and I related my experiences, and it was during that time also. Actually, also this is also a very successful documentary. It's streaming right now on streaming channels as well. If you
Really?
really want to watch it, yeah.
I know what I'm doing
So
tonight.
What's we're going to chat this out at the end as well. What is the title of the documentary?
It's called The Struggle for World Sanity. Yeah.
Oh, that's phenomenal.
Same as the book. Yeah. And so it was at that same time that I met my yogi master, Dr. George King. So nothing happens by chance. And so through my career in the technical background, the acting and the voiceover and all that, I was very grounded, but I didn't, but on the side, I was also doing healing, metaphysics, part of the organization, the Ethereal Society, and following my yogi master, and who I believe was a true contactee of UFOs or people from outer space.
It's well, number one, I'm completely floored too, because I've often longed for any kind of experience like that. You never had any interest in UFOs or aliens or anything up to this point?
No,
It's just
no.
you woke up one day, well, I guess one evening, you feel this calling to go there.
Yeah.
And this is the first experience you've ever had with it.
Yeah. And I didn't know anything about UFOs or whatever, but I got a feeling now, after all these years, that it was necessary to have that experience in order to write the book and the documentary and bring it out in the open. So it was all, I think it was planned. So, and meeting my yoga master, who I believe was a true contactee of people from outer space, from these so-called aliens, who I believe are extremely advanced beings, not only scientifically but also spiritually, and have a genuine concern for mankind, especially right now with what's going on around the world.
Oh, I hope you're right with that, my friend.
Well, why? The thing is, Tim, why would I get a spiritual energy come through me?
Sure, not about that, but in terms about, I hope you're right
felt,
about them wanting to be good for mankind.
Yeah, but the thing I felt was when I got this energy go through me, I felt that these people were very, not only scientifically advanced, I felt they were very spiritually advanced. And so I can't convince anybody of my experience. It was my own experience.
Sure.
But I can. That's why I kept it quiet. Usually, people who don't have those kind of experiences go on and say I was abducted, I saw this UFO and all that. I kept it quiet because it was so personal to me, so profound. And I honestly believe that experience was designed at this point for me to write the book, the documentary, and to let people know that we're not alone in the universe, that there are advanced beings who are watching over us even now and have our genuine, you know, beneficial benefit for us at this particular time.
Right. I think
What's
we hear
that
that
like
often.
holding on to that?
Right. I was just going to mention that, right? I think we hear that, just to add to what Shane just said, because I am interested in that, but I think we hear that often. I know Mike Mulligan talked about that when we spoke with him. You know, everybody thinks that if you have an experience like that, you know, the first thing you want to do is kind of shout it from the hilltop, but that's very common that we hear that you kept it to yourself, that it was a profound experience. And I think that unless you've had, and I've never had an experience like that, so I don't know how I would truly react. So, Shane, I didn't mean to jump on you there. I would like to know, what is it like keeping all of that in?
Well, like I say, it kind of clarified the fact that I was on the right track. And this yogi master that I found proved to me that he was a contactee of these extraterrestrials, not only outside of the solar system, but within the solar system. These are beings that inhabit. I mean, if you look at metaphysics, if you look at Buddhist philosophy, look at religious philosophy, you realize that, you know, it's not just a physical plane. There's other planes of existence, and these beings, a lot of them are on higher. Like nobody even knows what happens when we die, and a lot of people realize that we don't just suddenly disappear. We go to other realms of existence. The fact that we can't perceive them, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that they don't exist. And what Dr. King, my yogi master, said, that these beings are inhabited. They inhabit higher realms of existence on other planets in the solar system, but we can't see them or contact them, but they can contact us. You know, a lot of these UAPs, flying saucers, you see them kind of come into manifestation, go out of manifestation. So they can go through different frequencies, and they have technology that is like millions of years ahead of us. And the question, you know, I mean, we know people are not stupid anymore. They know that the governments are lying. They know that, you know, you just look at the galaxy and the possibilities of life is just endless. And so it's laughable now that to say that there's no life on other planets or in this solar system or in the galaxy. So now they're putting an edge on it that, oh my gosh, these people are going to come and invade us and kill us. And they're putting the fear aspect in it. But in reality, it's completely opposite, you know. I believe that when the Cold War occurred, you know, in the 1950s, and they started exploding the atom and hydrogen bombs, you know, a lot of UFOs were seen in the skies. And I believe there was a direct concern in the solar system that is not only going to affect the planet, but also other planets in this solar system. So they intervened on our behalf and absorbed a lot of the radioactivity. Scientists these days still cannot understand why we're still alive. And there was, in the Ural Mountains, there was a gigantic atomic explosion that the Russians created in an underground secret nuclear facility. And over 18 million people could have died. And Dr. King was informed about this explosion and the absorption that was taken. And it was only till 1970 when a few of the Russian scientists that defected talked about this explosion. So it was, to me, it was valid that he was in contact with these beings who talked about this explosion and the action that they took in order to rectify the situation. So we're never left alone. We can still war against each other, but in the end, their message is one of hope and one of salvation, which I believe is so necessary in these days.
During the congressional hearings, that was probably the first time that I think most people have ever heard the government formally acknowledge the fact that, there is something out there, but they didn't say the word aliens. David Grush specifically kept using the phrase NHI, non-human intelligence, and I don't think that was an accident. I think growing up, at least I could speak for myself, I always sort of envisioned these being like little bodies, like little creatures that are coming down and they're flying in from outer space and landing here. And then you've heard, variations of that story that they come up from the ocean maybe instead, or what have you. But the idea that they are just kind of in a different frequency is relatively new to pop culture, not to people that have been in ufology for a long time. And I think that's one of the reasons that this topic has become so interesting, because you collect all of these stories that have happened throughout the past, and you touched on this a little bit just a moment ago, where you start to talk about, well, what is life and what happens after death? And we started to dive down some of those rabbit holes on some other episodes we've done. Just a week ago, we had Jock Brokaw on here, and we were talking about just that, the idea that, these paranormal experiences could break your psyche, because you get overwhelmed with these spiritual encounters, and your mind doesn't really know how to reconcile it. We've talked a lot about like NDEs. We've talked a lot about the idea of reincarnation and all of these stories that are now starting to surface because we have the internet that's like weaving these webs together and connecting people whose children are talking like with great detail about these lives that happened before. I can't help but think that these all are interconnected in some way. To your point too, we should have wiped ourselves out by this point. And it seems like there is always somebody that's righting the ship right before things have kind of gone off the rails. And it's very obvious that if you believe any fragment of the idea of aliens or UFOs, then you should believe the fact that they have the technology and capability to wipe us out in an instant. So the idea that they're hostile to me has always been fringe, and I use that word very reluctantly. I'm curious, when you start to look at the UFO phenomenon through that lens, do you see a connection between these encounters and human consciousness, where it's all kind of embedded in one?
Well, if your viewers and readers research, my Yogi Master, and a lot of the the telepathic transmissions that came through him, they have propounded that we go back to the natural spiritual laws, and two of the laws that they're pushing right now, which a lot of the Orthodox religions have hidden, is first the law of karma, and the second is the law of reincarnation. And they're pushing that right now because a lot of the divisions that are occurring around the world is based on racial prejudice, based on religion, based on different ideologies. And what they're saying is we're all one. There's no such thing as an American or a Chinese or a Russian or an Iranian. We're all one. We're all sparks of that which created us. And reincarnation answers the question. I mean, I think it was AD 424 when they had the meeting in Constantinople. And at that time, before that, the Christian religion actually taught reincarnation, and they deliberately took it out and put this one life to live in order to control the masses and say, either you do what we do, or you go to hell, or you go to heaven. And so these space intelligences are telling us now to go back to the natural spiritual laws, the law of karma, which should be taught to any school kid, that you're responsible for your actions, good, bad, or indifferent. And the law of reincarnation, which states that we go through many, many lives in order to gain that experience of life. And we're not here to suffer. We're here to learn to live on this beautiful planet. And all this nonsense, this national pride of being this race, this color, is just a facade. And if people start realizing before they go to war and start killing people that they could have been our brother or our sister or our father or mother, then that realization would bring a lot of peace on this world. So that's one of the two agendas that they're pushing right now.
That actually makes a lot of sense. I'd never thought about that. You mentioned that, the Christians would teach reincarnation, but if you instill in people that you have one life to live and you better live it according to the way God wants you to live, otherwise you're going to be damned to an eternity of fire and brimstone. That's a scary proposition. What easier way to control somebody? That's a very, very interesting thought. I'm going to have to look deeper into that. But I do have another question for you. I feel like, at least for me, we kind of, your initial experience, that I feel like we kind of glossed over that a little bit. You had a craft. Okay, you saw two orbs. You had this craft hover over you that shone a light on you, and you felt this spiritual energy. That's friggin' amazing. I want to know more about what you felt in that moment when you saw this craft, this light comes down, and you felt that spiritual energy. Was it emotions that you felt? Was it thoughts that you had? Can you is it something that's almost inexplicable? You can't even explain it. What was happening at that point in time?
The first thought that came into my mind, Tim, was again that these people not only scientifically advanced but also spiritually advanced.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about aliens landing. Again, these cosmic beings have said that aliens have already landed, and they've throughout the centuries, and they're saying people like they said one of the greatest UFO sightings ever was the Star of Bethlehem.
Mm-hmm.
It hovered over this, it led the wise men to the stable and hovered over there through day and night, and they what they're saying is people like Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Patanjali, Lao Tse, I Ching, Sankaracharya, these were beings not from this earth. These were beings that reincarnated into the earth cycle to teach what? To teach the spiritual laws. What part of thou shalt not kill, don't you understand? They came from higher spheres. These were interplanetary masters that came from higher spheres to teach. And guys, you go through any religion, what does it teach? It says it's basically they're all the same. They say don't kill, be kind, be merciful, and be nice to each other. And these religions have been warped by dogma, ideology, to the point where people are killing women and children in the name of religion. All this has to stop. And this is they're coming. They're saying to us, we're not coming with anything new. We're just telling you guys to go back to this basic spiritual laws. We're not telling you to be religious. We're telling you to be spiritual. And, you're coming back to reincarnation, Tim, it answers, the age-old question, why, this so-called imbalance in this world? Why is somebody born rich or poor or crippled or blind? If there was one life to live, then that would be a big punishing God. So that law has to that new it's not a new ideology. It's been taught throughout the centuries. But once people realize that I am not only a Christian, I'm also a Jew, a Muslim, and a Hindu in my previous lives, they stop all this squabble. And that's one of the messages that these beings, beings that are so powerful. Dr. King asked one of them telepathically. He said, if you did land and take over this planet, how long will it take? They said 15 minutes. That's the kind of power that they have. And we can't understand them because they're benevolent, they're kind, and they're caring. But we have to do the work. We have to change before they come more openly amongst us. Food for thought.
It's a really good segue that I'm probably going to ruin before we get into that segue. I wanted to circle back to the idea of karma and reincarnation a little bit. It's always dumbfounded me that religion became so segmented and at each other's throats because, like you said, the basis of them all are the exact same thing. They're literally throughout history. Whatever you called your gods' names, you all had the same gods. You all have the same stories. Like everyone has something that kind of aligns with itself. And for the longest, I grew up going to the Catholic Church, going through CCD, received all my sacraments. And I just stopped caring about that stuff when I had gotten older after seeing my parents both die early, plenty of members of my family passing away at very young ages. So why am I going to care about any of this stuff? I never paid much mind to spirituality either until more recent years, but it's fascinating finding the connections, like the law of karma, right? Do good and you'll get treated better later. Well, Tim, you touched on it before, don't be an ass to people. and you're going to go to heaven, right? Or you're going to get punished and go to hell. So it's like these ideologies, if you will, are the same. We just change the words. The idea of reincarnation is shunned in the Catholic Church now, but we're taught that Jesus died and he resurrected. I know it's a different word and slightly different meaning, but we're also taught that he is in all of us, which would imply that he reincarnated into all of us in some degree, or that we're all connected in that same way that we're talking about on this grander scale. And so it's always, I don't know, once I started looking into that and adopting those philosophies, it sort of like shattered my illusion, if you will, of organized religion, and just made me question what are we doing here? Why are we funding so many wars and batting each other over the head constantly? And it always comes down to the same thing. My religion says this, and your religion, which is almost identical, says this, but like 3 words are different in the basics of it. I don't know, just a thought that I wanted to kind of touch on before we move forward.
It's a great thought, but the thing is, when it comes down to the wars and all that, what people don't understand, again, we're going to look into other realms. There's realms below us. They're full of like people that, are, I guess we can call them the dark forces, and there's realms above us where they have the forces of light, and we're just pawns in a game. We're controlled by the money, we're controlled by, the elite, and they just, wars are nothing but increasing the stock and profits of the defense companies. They got nothing to do with the ideology of any country, and both countries are usually supplied with the same weaponry from the same defense companies.
Right.
And then what people don't understand is that behind the scenes on the other realms, there's a fight, there's an energy battle between the forces of good and the forces of evil, and the forces of evil want to create these kind of divisions and scenarios so that they can, when people die and go to these other realms, they can be used as pawns in these lower realms. Now, when I was younger and I met Dr. King, I wanted to look for proof that he was actually a real contactee, and he wrote some excerpts in one of his books called "You Are Responsible." And this is amazing, guys. They would give to him exact dates and times in New Zealand, Australia, America, England, and other places where UFO sightings would be. Listen to this: 3 weeks before they happened. 3 weeks before they happened, and each one was valid. And they had to stop that because the governments caught onto it, and they were scrambling fighter jets to intercept the UFOs. So to me, that was proof in itself that he was a genuine contactee. So that's something that, again, something
That's amazing
that you guys can kind of think about.
Shane, who does that make you think of?
3 weeks? I'm not sure.
No.
You put,
Who else does that make you think of? Who else can do that?
Yeah. I mean, who
that we've spoken to? Mike Mulligan.
Mike Mulligan. Yes. He did have a similar situation where he would summon them.
Yes, Wajid, I'm not sure if you have had an opportunity to listen. I think twice now we've had on Mike Mulligan. Great gentleman. Is he in New Hampshire?
Yeah.
Somewhere in the Northeast? I believe New Hampshire. No, that's a lie. It's a place. He's in a place. Point being...
He's in New Hampshire.
Yeah, okay. So he had mentioned to us a few times, and this was like prior to the sightings occurring, that he has been alerted by some non-human intelligence that they would be showing up in particular places, and lo and behold, it comes out of the news that there were orb sightings or UFO sightings in these places, and it's just like, holy crap, like he told us that this was going to happen and it's in the news, it happened. So that's to your point. I think that further bolsters your opinion of your yogi master of being able to actually be a real contactee, right? I mean, heck,
and
what more proof
as
do
a
you
yogi
need?
master, he could project from his body, and he actually visited these people on the higher realms of Venus and Mars and Jupiter, and Saturn. And he said they were actually humanoid beings. They were like 7 feet tall with a one-piece suit. And so all these little green man aliens and whatever, I believe that these are like androids that they use for some of their research or whatever work that they do. Like I think Roswell, my own personal opinion, these were androids that were deliberately crashed by the space beings in order to give mankind some extra advanced technology. Just that's just my opinion. But coming back to these the capabilities of these beings, Dr. King said that there's a particular spacecraft that orbits Earth, which is about 1.5 miles long, comes in orbit, and on their computer system, they just like with a GPS, you can track somebody down on Earth, pinpoint them. They with their advanced technology, they can pinpoint every live stream on the planet, and when it comes into orbit of the Earth, anybody who's doing any spiritual work, they beam down energies to that particular person. So they're very concerned about what's happening right now. I think these are end days. They really are. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. But I think we're at the crossroads now. They've said that this particular Earth that we live in is a living, breathing goddess. She's not just a piece of rock, and she's raising her vibrations. So if people don't conform to these spiritual energies, they won't be able to stay on this earth. So, in the years to come, as her, what they say, as her vibrations raise, we have to raise our vibrations. And all the warmongers and the murderers and all that, they won't be allowed to stay. What Dr. King said, that they will be taken through death to another planet in this solar system to start the recycle in this new planet that's some scientists call Planet X. So it's up to all of us now. Either we conform to the spiritual laws, that we come together as one race. We're all connected metaphysically as one race, and we resolve our differences. Come together as one human race. They call us the citizens of Earth. They don't refer to us as any particular country or any citizen of any country. And the time has come, before this new age is dawning, that either we conform or we won't be allowed to be staying on this earth. So that's something that I explain in my book and the documentary as well.
I'm glad you brought that back up, because I was worried I ruined my segue before, and you kind of brought us back into it. So it's perfect. A theme that's come up frequently in discussion around metaphysics is the idea that humanity may be on the cusp of, or at least going through this evolution of awareness, if you will. Obviously, our technology has advanced incredibly quickly, but you pointed it out directly. Our wisdom, our spiritual development has not necessarily kept pace with that technology. And so we're still acting and doing as we did centuries ago. Although I guess you could argue that too, if you believe that we've cycled through this before. In a lot of your work and the research you did, you talk about the importance of rediscovering that deeper connection with consciousness, compassion, and a shared responsibility for life on this planet. You said the words exactly, this idea of a spiritual awakening. When you look at the world today, socially, technologically, spiritually, do you believe that humanity is moving towards a greater level of awareness? I know you sort of said that it might get darker first, but does that mean extinction level event darker, or do you mean that it's going to be what's going on right now over in the Middle East? And then, Chris Bledsoe has alluded to the fact that if Israel and Iran were to go at it again, it was going to bring upon somebody or something from this greater being, if you will, to start to open people's eyes to put an end to it. Do you align with that thought? Is the timeline off? I'd love to kind of know where you think we are in that journey.
Well, I think the forces of darkness are trying to cause World War III for sure.
For sure.
And they want, because they realize these are not people on the physical realms. These are like demonic beings on lower realms that control humanity through pawns, like the elite and people like that control the money. But the thing is, either we rise en masse in peace, or we're doomed. And if there is a World War III, then most of the people will be taken off this planet. They won't be allowed to reincarnate back on this planet, and will be taken to another younger world to relive the horrors. But we have an opportunity to rise up in peace en masse. And one of the things that they say that we're actually spiritual beings in physical bodies. It's not the other way around. And we have auras and psychic senses. And they said the only solution to all this madness is spiritual energy. That's the only thing that's lacking. It's not the lack of spiritual energy. It's just that we don't use it. So we can be channels of spiritual energy, just like Hades is an energy that we can project. We can also project the energy of love. And so regardless of race, color, creed, or religion, we can tune into these higher beings, these interplanetary masters, and they will beam these energies through us out to the world. Because not only is the hatred, and look at social media, look at the hatred in the mind belt that's being created all around the world. So we need to, in order to stop this, we need to come en masse and send this healing power out to the world, through our heart center, through our psychic centers, and do whatever prayer or invocation or mantra or whatever. It doesn't matter how you do it, but just send out the white light of the pranic energy that comes from the sun, and send it out and light up the world, instead of lighting it up with nuclear bombs, which they're intent to do right now. So we're at a crossroads, and they're not going to stop us from creating World War III, but we can stop ourselves. And if enough people get together and send out the light, the more power that they will send to us. And Dr. King was told that there is coming another avatar or a spiritual leader, and he will come openly in a spacecraft. I think he mentioned that possibly by then the financial systems would have collapsed by then. So I think around that time, and he will lead men into a new age, or into a new future, based on unity of religions, unity of ideology. So all this madness needs to stop right now. And the only people, they're not coming to politicians, they're not going to generals, they're not going to leaders of religions. They're coming to people like me. Why did they choose me to go out in the wilderness and get I'm a nobody, and people around the world are getting these experiences. So they're going to the man, woman, and child on the street, because these are people that are going to be open to receive this kind of energy and inspiration. That's the way that they're working through, is through people, normal people that want to make a change in the world.
Well, I mean, in terms of financial crash, we're kind of in an AI bubble right now, and as of right now, it's somewhat stable. Although what's going on in the Middle
It could
East
come
and the
down
Gulf
any time,
states,
Tim. Yeah.
right? A lot of that AI money is coming from those Gulf states who are not too happy with America right now, right? So who knows what that's going to look like? Hopefully, we're further away from that than I want to believe. But it is interesting you do say that, because a lot of folks believe we're kind of right. We're almost there right now. But I do have a question for you, and you kind of somewhat answered it already, but I want to touch on it again. Spirituality. And you had mentioned that people need to work on their spirituality, project a higher
I'm
level
not the
of
only one having
spirituality.
issues tonight talking.
Apparently, right? And I think,
and he's just drinking nice water. Go ahead.
I think a lot of times, I don't want to say a bad rap, but people often look at spirituality as this hippy dippy people that I have crystals, and the crystals have an energy, and I read your zodiac sign, and I'm gonna decide what color pants I wear today by what stars I see in the sky, and just a lot of fluffy things that a lot of people would find silly, right? But I don't think that's not necessarily what spirituality means. That's not what spirituality is. How can people, quote unquote, work on their spirituality and project a higher level of it?
I had a quote the other day which was interesting. They said that religion is for those people who are trying desperately not to go to hell. And spirituality is for those people who have been there, you know.
I like that saying.
You know, the crystals and the indigo and the violet, that's all cool. But, you know, there's practical spirituality, like saving lives in a fire. You know, that's spirituality. You know, like stopping a crime from occurring. So these, you know, these people have, for millions of years, they have the frequency of every living creature on this planet on their computer systems. And so you can be a mass murderer, but if you do some good, energy will be sent to you. So they don't discriminate between the so-called goody two shoes. They send energy to everybody, no matter race, creed, religion, or whatever situation they are. So long as they're doing some good, energy will be sent to them. I mean, this is a science beyond Star Trek or any of that stuff. This is a science that's so advanced, you know, that these beings know every live stream, the frequency, energy output of every live stream, and when they come into orbit, they can send this spiritual energy to anybody. Doctors, nurses, people are in the war zone, you know, rescue workers. You know, that's also spirituality. In fact, I would say that's more spirituality than being in an ashram chanting mantra. That's the way I feel. You know,
Yeah,
giving
you know,
healing,
yeah.
putting your hand and giving healing to anybody, you know, no matter who they are. That's the kind of spirituality that they're talking about. Jesus
I
did
love
that.
that. No,
Jesus did that,
yeah.
you know?
You're right. I love that. And there's something beautiful and simple in that, right? There's you don't have to go out and study and buy crystals and place
No.
them in all four corners of your room and
Actually,
chant
those
something
people
to
are
be a spiritual person, right?
those
Like
people
that's
are
silly.
actually hiding. Those people are actually hiding from humanity because they're looking to go within too much. These are not the days to go within. These are the days to go out in amongst the you know, the drug addicts and the alcoholics and the murderers and help these people, you know, the warmongers. So that's the true spirituality. That's the call to action these days, and not hiding, you know, by the ocean and trying to go within and get some high yourself. You know, that's fine, fair and dandy. I mean, that's what in the East the yogis used to do that. But now the new call is to be amongst the smell and the slime and the stink, and raise mankind. And again, that notion that, you know, we work not just for our own country, family and friends, but for the whole world. And that concept has to be the uppermost in our minds if we're going to save humanity from the dark side of humanity. And these are, see, you know, in the UFO field, there's all this speculation, well, this, that, and the other, and you know, this conspiracy and that conspiracy, and they, you know, through Dr. King, they've laid it bare that we, you know, they've been watching us for millions of years. You know, there's no such thing as, you know, conspiracy or whether they're there or not. I mean, there's so much proof. I don't have to go through it. You guys know that all the proof that there is about UFOs, and but the question is, who are they? Why are they here? And what they're doing? And that's the answer that I can give through my yogi master and the teachings that he gave through these interplanetary beings.
Another area where metaphysics often enters the conversation is the idea that consciousness itself may influence physical reality. You mentioned the East. Things like meditation, intention, energy work have often been discussed in spiritual circles, but have a history of being part of the medical practice in Eastern medicine throughout history, way in the past, even to today. Interestingly, in more recent times, even mainstream science here in the West has started to kind of explore related ideas. Research into meditation is showing measurable changes in brain activity. People are constantly telling you to meditate now when you're stressed out, whereas years ago, like Tim was alluding to, you'd be looked at like a quack, right? The placebo effect by itself is demonstrating the idea that your belief alone that you're getting better can influence your physical outcomes just by thinking that you're feeling better and it's working. It works, right? Fields like mind body medicine continue to explore how consciousness may affect health and well-being. I'm curious how you see that connection. Do you believe that humans have untapped abilities when it comes to consciousness and healing? And are these the types of abilities that you can kind of learn to develop? I know doing things is sort of a direct question, increasing your spirituality to Tim's question, but I'm curious if there's something even at home that you can do internally to better yourself, give yourself that
Well,
confidence.
you see, the yogi masters of the East, they have the ability. We have an aura, we have psychic centers, we have a channel, a subtle body as well. And these yogi masters, by bombarding the base of the spine with pranic energies, manage to raise their consciousness. They call it the power of Kundalini, and raise it to higher consciousness where they could fly in the air, they could levitate, they could materialize, dematerialize. So we have all that ability within us. Now, to do to what the yogi masters in the East for the West is very dangerous. So to raise our consciousness, again, what these cosmic beings are doing is they're gently sending these pranic energies, which gently are bombarding the psychic centers from the base of the spine upwards. And so to raise it's another way of raising the consciousness. Dr. King says there was only one reason we're on Earth today, and that's to raise the power of Kundalini, to have these deep meditative states, to reach these high consciousness. We didn't come here to suffer. This earth is a beautiful classroom in order to gain experience, not the misery that we've created. So our destiny is to become, spiritual advanced beings. And I hate to say it, but we were like that before we destroyed the civilization of Lemuria and Atlantis. We were very advanced beings at one time, but we've evolved ourselves. So they're trying to tell us that by channeling the energy through the psychic centers, especially from the heart center, is a very balanced way of raising our consciousness as within, as well as helping the world. So it's our duty not only to send out the energy, but to raise our consciousness for the benefit. There was a prison in Thailand where it was a very violent prison, and they had the prisoners do meditation for 15 minutes a day, and a lot of the violence went away. So the combination of sending out healing and raising the consciousness is an excellent balance in these days. We have to, because we could go crazy, with the debt and the anxiety and the stress of modern living. So it's important sometimes not only to send out the power, but also to go within and raise our consciousness, because that's part of our heritage. It's the way we are as human beings. We are in a very involved state right now, and what they're saying is, come join us and be part of the cosmos. And raising the consciousness is essential in these days, especially to stay somewhat sane. I mean, I get up in the morning. Part of my ritual is not only prayer but meditation and breathing exercises to start my day and get to the point where I have some kind of conscious contact with a power greater than myself, which is within me or outside of me. I'm not quite sure yet, but at least I'm trying. So yeah, that's definitely a go-to in these times of stress. Absolutely.
It's amazing what just a few deep breaths in the morning and just maybe waking up 5 minutes early so you're not rushing can do to change your entire day, right? It's just take a second, take a deep breath, go outside for a minute. There's people in like the biohacking field that will, Andrew Huberman's big with this, that'll just say the first thing you should do when you wake up is just go look at the sun for a little bit, spend 5 minutes, stand outside, step on grass.
I do it every
so
day.
It's just, yeah, like such small, simple things that just reset your head for the day. And look what it could do. It just completely change your mindset and elevate your spirituality.
On the advanced level, these beings are advanced spiritually. Dr. King had to raise his consciousness, the, the power of Kundalini up and above the heart center, so he could actually be in tune telepathically with these people. It took him 10 years to develop that. Doing yoga for 8 to 10 hours a day in order to connect with these people. Not that we're being asked to do yoga for 8 to 10 hours a day, but to generally raise our consciousness. And because we're all interconnected, as we individually raise our consciousness, we raise the consciousness. For every person that's murdered, the whole of mankind goes down a little bit. For every person that's healed and raised, the whole of mankind, we're all connected. We're all metaphysical. We're all in it together. And that's the main aspect of their teachings these days is to come together en masse and raise our consciousness, send out the power, and because it's so simple, it goes over people's heads.
That's a good point.
I mean, think about it, guys. Think
yeah.
about it. You got a civilization that's so advanced that they can individually send energies, and all we have to do is just become a recipient and send out the light.
Right.
I mean, it's beyond belief, but it's true. I believe it. I felt it. I feel the energies when you can mentally ask for that energy and it'll come through you. You can put your hand in front of a mirror and send out white light, and you can feel the reflection coming back, tingling on your fingers and around your aura. That's another thing you guys can try, your viewers can try, to know that spiritual energy, pranic energy, just like wind and electricity, we can't see it, but it's just as real. It's just on a higher frequency. That's all.
I think that, and you hit the nail on the head, right? I don't think it's ever been more important for people to get back to, I kind of look at it and call it like the original state of being. And not only because of the negativity, right, that is going on right now in the world, right? I mean, we're a mess, right? Globally, we're an absolute disaster right now. But that aside, for me, and I'm curious to know rather how you feel about it, we're all obsessed with this, right? Like, most of the population that has one of these is like this for far longer than they should be every single day of their lives. So Shane mentioned it just a few minutes ago. I go outside every morning, and I did this all winter long. We had a cold winter in New Jersey. After I get my kids off to school, and this is before an hour of waking up, I sit outside with my coffee, and I'm bundled up. I got my jacket on, but I sit outside. I don't bring my phone with me, and it's just me, and I have my coffee there, and I just observe. I don't have any expectations. If there's birds in a tree or there's squirrels that are running around. I mean, one day, I kind of feel a little corny saying this, but I was watching these squirrels kind of play with one another, and I actually smiled. Like, it was just so, like, it was just funny, like, just watching them play with one another, right? Like, kind of go back and forth. They were, like, fighting together and playing in this tree. And not saying everybody has to go out and look at squirrels, but do you feel like, aside from all the negativity in the world, do you feel like it's really important to get back to that original sense of being because we're so obsessed with technology?
Well, we're a slave to our phones, let's face it, and social media has now become an addiction for young kids, and it needs to stop because, it's ruining their minds. A little, I get on Facebook, I watch a few funny cat videos and wherever, nothing wrong with a little entertainment. But I totally agree. I was in Africa in 2006, and I went to this village where there were people living in huts made of cow dung. They were living off the land, but they didn't have iPhones, they didn't have credit cards, they didn't have all the madness of the Western world, the material things. They were living off the land. And there was a sense of contentment. The children were laughing and playing. And that's the thing, is we're bogged down in materialism. Look at Black Friday, when people just fighting each other for the latest, stupid TV that's on sale. So what they're saying is we're caught up in this, like, madness, this illusion. They call it, the Easterns call it Maya, of materialism, you know, and that's just the basic part of us. The real part of us is the spiritual selves, you know. You know, when we die, our soul goes, then the physical stays. Doesn't matter how much money you have, you can't take anything with you. So it's important to get away, you know, from materialism, get away from debt. I mean, that's how they're holding us as hostages, slaves, is keep us in debt through mortgages and credit cards, and the whole country's in debt by, you know, loaning them billions of dollars, and they have to pay off millions in interest by raising, you know, gas prices and whatever. So they're saying get away from materialism, work only long enough and hard enough for the things you want, not the things you need, you know, not the thing, just the things you need, not the things you want, and get away from all this material stuff and focus on becoming more of a spiritual person than a selfish materialistic, because, you know, we worship, you know, athletes and actors and billionaires more than we listen to the teachings of the great masters. Go figure. And look at the athletes and the actors and the politicians. You know, they come down and people feel really weird when they go down and expose themselves as they are, as corrupt and human beings. And the cosmic beings, the great spiritual teachers, you know, the greatest politicians that I follow, people like Jesus and Buddha and Krishna, and the ones that told the truth and were not afraid to tell the truth, that we are one. So I follow those people, not the politicians or the generals or the actors or the billionaires. These are not the these are demigods. These are gods that we've created out of materialism. So again, it's going back to listening to the teachings of those that really count. You know, the unfailing teachings, the teachings that stand over centuries, that never change. You know, the teachings of truth, and follow the spiritual laws.
One of the things I love about our audience is that we get a good blend of people that are very open-minded and very grounded in their thinking. And so when we tackle topics like this, it's often difficult for some of them to kind of wrap their head around it. And so I like to, towards the end of each of these, kind of talk to those people a little bit. Throughout this episode specifically, we cover a lot of different ideas, possibilities, theories. I think when it comes to metaphysics and consciousness, the truth is that science still has a lot of unanswered questions. Researchers can measure brainwaves, they can map neural activity, they can identify which regions of the brains activate during certain emotions or thoughts. But what they cannot explain is why awareness exists at all. How does electrical activity in like a 3-pound organ suddenly just produce a sense of experience or identity? And why is that so different than other creatures that roam the earth? And that's something that neuroscience struggles to answer. We're not even close to being able to do that. At the same time, when we look at things like UFO encounters, there's plenty of very practical explanations for some of those sightings. Some of them are atmospheric phenomena. Others are experimental aircraft. We saw the little bit in New Jersey back in November, kind of a blend of both the unexplained and the very explained. We have some theories on that ourselves. And some are just misidentified. You know, Wajid, you alluded to it earlier in the beginning that, you know, the people that come out and start parading it around are probably the ones that didn't have a real experience. And the ones that do often stay quiet. And those are the ones, those cases always remain unexplained, if you will, to the mainstream. And that's not just by civilians or trained pilots, it's by everyone. On that consciousness side, science doesn't fully understand what awareness actually is, where it originates, and whether it might exist in ways that we don't understand. So again, as the conspiracy realists, as we once dubbed this podcast in the beginning, our goal isn't to tell you what to believe necessarily, but it's simply to kind of explore those questions and acknowledge when those answers are missing. Until those answers exist in science, the possibility to me remains that reality is probably a lot more complex than we understand. And that's where, I think this idea, this blossoming of spirituality kind of taking over the world right now, it's a really sensible explanation for a lot of those things that have gone unexplained. And I think sometimes people struggle with that, not having a very black and white answer on, this is this way because of this. And that's just not how things work in life and throughout. Wajid, this has been an incredible conversation, and it's weird in a way because we haven't really generally touched a lot on spiritual topics throughout the almost 100 episodes that we've done this podcast over the last almost 2 years. And then all of a sudden, it's just been one after another. It's been integrating itself into all of our conversations. As we mentioned, like a little bit on the reincarnation stories, a little bit on near death. We had an episode last week that was just talking about how spirituality can and fix your mind, right? And there's a discussion deep into like mental illness and the fracturing of the mind, and it's just, and now you join us tonight again, kind of expanding that conversation. So if that is not a higher power somewhere saying something to us, the fact that these have been one after another, then I don't know what is. But I want to give you an opportunity to just kind of share. You've talked about your book and your documentary. Where can we find them, and where can we find you?
You can just go to my website, wajidauthor.com.
Amazing. And I'll add that in the description below for everyone that's watching or listening.
the documentary link is there as well.
Amazing.
And
Good.
it's based on the book. But I think the top what we connected now was the connection between UFOs, interplanetary masters, and Earth. I brought that to an understanding which most UFOologists don't realize. They're all into the scientific aspect of it, and I'm throwing out the spiritual aspect of it.
Mhm.
That these are beings who are extremely advanced spiritually and really, really care for us. They love us probably more than we love each other.
That's not a hard bar to cross right now.
Well, it's like I love cats and I rescued cats, and but the cats are going to fight between themselves, but I still love them,
Yeah.
and that's probably the
Right.
way they look at us.
That's a
It's
great
like
point.
poor little creatures, they're fighting and whatever, but we'll love them anyway. We'll keep on try to help these lost souls and bring them back together to where they were supposed to be. And they want us to join. They want us to be happy. They want us to be happy, joyous, and free. They want us to be lifted up. They don't want to see this planet, in nuclear war. They want to see everybody raise their consciousness and and be peace and live in peace. And it's a concept which has been taught throughout the centuries by these great beings, which I believe were interplanetary masters.
Tim, you've really started to have a big spiritual awakening yourself. You've mentioned a couple times in this podcast. How does this sit with what you've been kind of self-discovering yourself? Today's talk.
It's funny that what you had just mentioned, how almost kind of inadvertently we've been having many spiritual conversations, and it's so fascinating to me because you just mentioned I have been dabbling, if you will, in my own spirituality, which is something that if you had asked me a year ago, I would have said, you're on crack cocaine. That's not me. I'm just not, or I wasn't that guy. And so without getting wishy-washy on it, it is almost like this energy telling me like, hey man, you're on the right path. Keep working. Like keep it up. You're doing the right thing. You've got forward momentum, and it's ever present. It's why else? I mean, I didn't think in a million years, right, tonight or last week, that we would have such an in-depth conversation on spirituality. I thought that we might touch on it a bit, but we talked about it quite a bit. In fact, I'd say it was probably the focal point of the conversation.
Yeah, but
So,
Tim, you're following your intuition, and that's what counts. And so is Shane, and so am I, and so are your viewers. There is a spiritual awakening occurring.
Yeah.
There is a great spiritual awakening, and it's going to overtake the madness eventually. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It may get worse before it gets better. But, you know, we are being prompted by spiritual energies. Our consciousness is being helped and being raised by these interplanetary masters, beaming these energies from their craft. You know, it's beyond science fiction. Science fiction, this is science beyond science fiction. They've told Dr. King that their instrumentations that they have on their craft are beyond the belief, the imagination of terrestrial scientists. This is how advanced they are, but they do it for positive reasons. You know, our best brains are designed now for the most killer destructive drones, and AI is now being charted for to kill as many people in as many countries as possible. So our best brains are geared towards murder and mayhem, and their best brains are geared towards peace, serenity, and healing. So it's time. It's time that we listen to our intuition, that little small voice within us, and follow it and become good people. Not that we're not bad people, but become better people. You know?
Yeah. I think it goes back to what you're taught as a kid, right? And this is kind of something that I've been going through recently. When you're a child, you're taught all of these positive things. Be kind, be a kind soul, be a kind person, accept people for who they are, treat people the way you want to be treated, spread love and happiness and compassion and joy, and you're just this little ball of positive energy when you're a child, right? And it's like somehow, for whatever reason or another, life experiences, that light becomes dim, it becomes dirty as we get older, and we kind of move away from it. And it's like, oh man, like all of a sudden you have this thought, and it's like, oh crap, that is still me. That is me. I used to be that. And it got dirty, and I just got to clean it. And it, to me, that's kind of what spirituality is, right? Or at least that's been my experience with it thus far in terms of my quote unquote spiritual awakening. And I don't even really know where I'm going with that. But I guess it's to say that, for anybody else out there,
we all get conditioned. As kids, we're fine. We just get conditioned by parents, society, religions, and TV, especially TV.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's as good a place as any. I was going to throw in a little caption here from a Batman movie, but we kind of walked away from that, but I'm going to throw it in anyway. This quote has stuck with me a lot when we've talked about really any struggle, but the quote goes something to the effect, I'll butcher it: the night is always darkest before the dawn. Things will get worse before they get better. And Wajid, I think that's what you're alluding to, and I think it's something worth holding on to, despite the fact that it came out of a superhero movie. It's always good to know that when you feel like you're at rock bottom in any form of life, it's always going to get worse before it gets better. For our listeners of tonight's episode, got you thinking deeper just about the nature of consciousness, about spirituality, about yourself, please like, follow, share this with a friend, leave a comment. You can make fun of Tim as much as you want in the comments. I always like to bust his balls about that when you do anyway. We've had a couple of those in the past. Check out Wajid's website, wajidauthor.com. I'm on it right now as I stare at my screen. You can buy his book right from a link on this page. The documentary, I'm seeing it's free to stream, which there's no excuse that there's a paywall behind it. I already opened it up and pressed play and paused it immediately so I can watch it. It's well worth it. And Wajid, you're just an interesting person all around. I had read your website quite a bit, quite extensively before even reaching out to you. There's so much more information on there, plenty more interviews. So I encourage you all to check that out. Again, in the description below. That'll be it for us tonight. Until next time, everyone, thank you for joining us. Cheers. And we'll see you when we see you again. So long, everybody.